Welcome everyone to another episode of the Love Talks. I'm Dr. Astera Brylka and I'm a psychologist and love and relationship consultant. In this podcast, my guests and I talk about relationships, marriages, dating, love, and other important life topics. Have you ever been in a relationship with someone that made you doubt in what you were experiencing on a daily basis? Have you felt that what your husband or wife or partner were doing and saying wasn't what they claimed it to be? Have you been confused to that extent that at some point you started questioning yourself and your sanity and thought that you were losing touch with reality? Yet, at the same time you had a gut feeling that there was something strange going on. If you have ever had that strange feeling, that you were or are currently living in an alternate reality to what you were or are registering with your senses, then it is more than likely that you have experienced gaslighting. Gaslighting is one of the most common manipulation techniques that is used mainly by narcissists, though not only, to gain power over and control their partners or spouses and be in charge of the whole dynamics of the relationship. The term itself comes from a stage play, Gaslight, by Patrick Hamilton, and a movie that was subsequently made and based on this play. In the US, it is known as Angel Street. In the movie, the devious husband manipulates and torments his wife to convince her that she's going mad. And he does that by manipulating small elements of their environment, particularly by turning up and down a flame in a gas lamp, by talking to himself, and making loud noises in the attic of the house. But when the wife asks why he has dimmed the light, or whether he has heard voices and noises, he insists that she remembered things incorrectly, is imagining things, or that she is mistaken and even delusional for that matter. As the result, the wife starts to believe that she is becoming insane. Gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse where a person or group makes another individual question their memories, sanity, and their perception of reality. It does not occur only in romantic relationships or in marriages, but can take place in any other relationship, including friendships, parent-child relationships, or employer-employee relationships. Because it is carried out covertly and immediately denied by the abuser if in any way addressed, it is difficult for the victims to realize what is really going on. Hence, the emotional abuse that the victims are experiencing through gaslighting can build over a long period of time while being pretty much unrecognized by them or other people in their surroundings. The mechanism behind gaslighting creates cognitive dissonance in the abused partner or spouse and results in the victim questioning their own reality testing, their perceptions, and their reasoning and thinking. As those who are experiencing gaslighting become confused, anxious, and unable to trust themselves and their own judgments, their self-esteem plunges. They also become more and more dependent on the abuser and susceptible to his or her control. This happens because the victims do not believe their own mental capacities anymore and doubt their ability to be able to manage in life without their partners. A question that inevitably comes to mind is, why would anyone be doing something so twisted and cruel as gaslighting to their partner or spouse, to someone that they are supposed to care about, love and support? Gaslighting, as any other psychological manipulation in a relationship or marriage, is about creating mental distortion and emotional exploitation on a partner or spouse. The abusive partner takes over the whole power in the relationship. He or she controls the abused spouse and gets from them different benefits and privileges at the expenses of the manipulated spouse. That is the reason for using manipulation, including gaslighting, in relationships. Of course, not everyone does that. To subject someone close to this kind of devious and extremely harmful manipulation takes a specific kind of a person. Those who manipulate their closest ones are people that have been, or would have been, easily diagnosed with one of the Cluster B personality disorders. Cluster B personality disorders are characterized by dramatic, overly emotional, or unpredictable, in fact erratic, thinking or behavior. People with those disorders typically have difficulties regulating their emotions and struggle to maintain relationships. But what exactly do we have in Cluster B? Well, first of all, we have there our old friend, so to say. This is of course a sarcastic use of the word friend, the narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissists love to gaslight others. Those who have listened to my previous episode on ghosting should very well remember who narcissists are and how to recognize them in the crowd. If you have not yet learned how narcissists behave and act, then I really recommend you that you listen to the episode, because this knowledge can, literally, save your life and mental health from being ruined. Just to give you a taste of this disorder, or briefly remind you, if you are already familiar with it, the narcissistic personality disorder is characterized by, first of all, a long-term pattern of exaggerated feelings of self-importance, that can be called persistent grandiosity. Secondly, an excessive need for admiration. And the third thing, a lack of empathy for other people. If you want to know how narcissists behave, you can observe those specific narcissistic features in some movie characters. Well, apart from the flagship example of a narcissist, that is Gregory Anton from Gaslighting, played by Charles Boyer, there are other narcissists out there. For example, Miranda Priestley, played by Meryl Streep from The Devils Wear Prada. Also, Gilderoy Lockhart from Harry Potter and the Chambers of Secrets, played by Kenneth Branagh. Another one is Ingrid from White Oleander, that was played by Michelle Pfeiffer. And the very famous Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind, played by Vivien Leigh. Another Cluster B disorder is borderline personality disorder. You may have heard this term somewhere before. This disorder, although known for long, had its renaissance among psychologists and psychiatrists around 20 years ago. And since then, borderline became a very trendy word among lay people and in the pop culture, similarly to narcissism. And both these terms have been often overused and not always used in the correct way. I don't want to go into the details of this disorder now, but I will just briefly describe what the borderline personality is about and how it manifests. Those that are diagnosed or would be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder often feel that their life is like a roller coaster. Their relationships are short-lived and turbulent. Their emotions are unstable and intense and overwhelming. They easily react to triggers, especially with anger, but have serious difficulties to soothe themselves. They present impulsive behaviors that can be reckless, self-destructive, or literally self-harming or suicidal. Their self-image, life and everyday goals, and likes and dislikes change frequently in ways that feel confusing and unclear even to them. As people with borderline personality disorder feel a great fear of abandonment and try to avoid it at all costs, for them gaslighting may be one of the ways to control their partners, though it comes to them less naturally as it does to narcissists. If you are interested in some famous movie characters with borderline personality disorder, one would be Anakin Skywalker from the Star Wars series. Another one would be Annie Wilkes from Misery. That's quite a classic one. She was played by Kathy Bates. Another flagship example of portraying the borderline personality disorder would be Alex Forrest from Fatal Attraction. She was played by Glenn Close. Another one, Susanna Kaysen from Girl Interrupted. She was played by Winona Ryder. She's quite an often mentioned example of the borderline personality disorder. Another one, Harley Quinn. If you are a fan of Batman and Joker movies, then you should remember her from the Suicide Squad. She was played by Margot Robbie. Another cluster B personality disorder that is prone to gaslighting others is the antisocial personality disorder. People diagnosed with this disorder are also known as sociopaths. They disregard and violate social norms and the rights and feelings of other people. They have a low sense of morality and problems with impulsive and aggressive behavior that can lead them to legal problems. Similarly to narcissists, sociopaths love exploiting others for their own gain or pleasure by manipulating and deceiving. If they cannot achieve their goals through a facade of superficial charm, then they often turn to intimidation and violence. Close to the antisocial personality disorder is psychopathy. Sometimes these two disorders are mixed or used interchangeably, or psychopathy is being included under the umbrella of antisocial personality disorder. Although psychopathy is not a cluster B personality disorder, and is not even specified as a diagnostic entity for that matter, psychopaths also gaslight. And the most famous fictional characters that are either sociopaths or psychopaths are the Joker from the Batman movies. Another one is Hannibal Lecter, played by Anthony Hopkins in The Silence of the Lambs and its sequels, and by Mads Mikkelsen in the TV show Hannibal. Another one, Kevin from We Need to Talk About Kevin. That was a movie in which Tilda Swinton played the mother of Kevin, who was a sociopath. Another one, Louis Bloom from Nightcrawler, played by Jack Gyllenhaal. And Adrian Griffin from a very, very recent movie, The Invisible Man. He was played by Oliver Jackson Cohen. But why people that show the signs of these particular disorders gaslight? What is so special about them? And I mean special sarcastically. Although people with cluster B personality disorders want, in fact, to be considered very special. What all these disorders have in common and what makes gaslighting so easy for people with this disorder to use even on those that are their partners or spouses are, first, a lack of empathy, second, having no remorse, and third, not being able to handle responsibility for their own behavior. These three features is what all people who gaslight have in common. And when they gaslight their partners or spouses, they are usually very accurate, effective, and efficient in what they are doing, and this is because, first of all, they know how to detect their partner's weaknesses, second, they know how to use these weaknesses against their partners, and third, they also very well know how to convince their partners to give up something in order to serve the interests and fulfill the needs of the abuser. And the worst thing of all is that once the abuser succeeds in taking advantage of their partners or spouse, they will for sure repeat the violation in the future. And they will also sophisticate and perfect their gaslighting strategies over time because with the time passing, some victims, although getting more confused and anxious, they also start realize that something smells fishy. Of course, there are many victims of gaslighting that do not suspect at all that their partner or spouse does harm to them. But there are some victims that at some point start consider that the whole alternate reality that they seem to live in may, in fact, be crafted by their other half. Gaslighting comes in many forms. It does not refer to only one type of behavior, but it is rather an umbrella term that comprises different strategies of manipulating that are aimed at denying someone else's emotions and perceptions of reality. While some gaslighting strategies are covered, the other ones are pretty direct and blatant. One of those strategies is a straightforward denial of your reality, or the so-called forgetting. Here, the abuser controls the reality and leaves you with self-doubt, confusion, and second-guessing. When you are getting your reality sorted, which takes a lot of your energy and time, the abuser keeps confusing you even further. And at the end, you start accepting their version of reality. What you can hear from those abusers that prefer to straightforwardly deny your reality is, for example, "that has never happened," if you tell them about something that they did or said. Or another one, "I have never promised or said that." And this is when you, for example, mention that they promised to do that or that. Another one would be, "I don't know what you're talking about." Another strategy that is used by those that gaslight their partners is withholding. That happens when the abuser is silencing you on different sensitive topics that are important to discuss in your relationship. They do not allow you to stand up for yourself in order to have your needs met in this relationship, but instead they are letting you know, more or less directly, that if you voice your opinion, you may lose this relationship and they will walk away from you. And if that happens, it will be your fault, of course, not theirs. And these abusers quite often would tell you that if you bring it up again, then something bad will happen. Or, "I don't want to hear this again, because if I do, something bad will happen." Another strategy of gaslighting is contradicting/countering. And this occurs when the abusive partner twists your sense of reality by telling you that you didn't remember certain events or situations correctly when you actually did remember them accurately. When faced with contradicting, you may find yourself looking for old emails or text messages in order to prove to the abuser and yourself that he or she is wrong and you are right. And a sentence that you can hear from many abusers who use contradicting is something like, "I think you are mentally ill if you really believe that that was what happened." Or, "This is not how the things were." Another way of gaslighting is minimizing or trivializing. And in this case, the abusive partner makes your needs, feelings, or emotions seem unimportant. And from those who use minimizing or trivializing, you can hear the following sentences quite often. "You are so sensitive," or "you are hypersensitive," or "you are not going to get upset over such a small thing, are you?" Or "you should let go of the past," or "you are exaggerating, as always," or "I'm sorry that you feel this way," and "you have no right to feel this way." Gaslighting is insidious and does a lot of harm to those that are subjected to this form of abuse. I have already mentioned that those that are experiencing gaslighting become more and more confused over time, they doubt their perception of what is going on around them, and stop trusting themselves and their own senses and reasoning. Many of those that are gaslighted become isolated, either by their abusive partner or spouse, or they self-isolate. And they can do it because of the fear of being labeled as insane, or also because they don't really know what they are doing, they don't believe their reality anymore, so they may be afraid of unintentionally doing harm to others. Because of the isolation, the victims become more and more dependent on their gaslighting partners, both emotionally and in terms of their everyday functioning. Depression and anxiety are the very common outcomes in victims of gaslighting. For many, being gaslighted for months or, even more commonly, for years, is so extremely stressful that they start responding and acting in the same way as people who have experienced traumas such as sexual abuse, bullying, natural disasters, terrorist attacks, or wars. Hence, it is not uncommon that those who had been subjected to gaslighting can develop the post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Many men and women who were gaslighted in their previous relationships have difficulties moving on in their lives without professional help. Often, they have to undergo a therapy, and in many cases the therapy has to be combined with medication. And this shows exactly how deep the damage done by gaslighting goes and how devastated the victims, or survivors, of gaslighting are. Confronting the gaslighting partner or spouse is often extremely difficult. Not only will you be gaslighted even more from this point on, as the abuser realizes that you are resisting to accept their version of reality, but often the abuser will start talking behind your back to your friends or family members that something wrong is happening with you and he or she is afraid that you may be experiencing some mental health challenges. And that's all done to destroy your credibility in case you start telling what is happening behind the closed door to people who could help you. By destroying your credibility, the abuser is always one step ahead of you. Because even if you are among those lucky gaslighted ones that do not believe in their own insanity and sense that what is happening around them is orchestrated by their partner or spouse, you will not be believed by anyone if you decide to share your concerns. Even more, at this point, by sharing your experience and suspicions with others, you will in fact prove to them that your abusive partner was right when telling them earlier that something really wrong was happening with your mental health. And this is exactly why gaslighting is so dangerous. Not only is the gaslighted partner victimized by gaslighting as such, but they also often experience secondary victimization when they are looking for help and sharing their experience of abuse with others. As sad as it sounds, people who do not gaslight others, and they have never ever heard about it or experienced it themselves, will be more willing to believe the perpetrator that you have mental health issues than believing you that something so insidious and hideous is being done to you by the person who should love you and have your best interests at heart. It's sounding much more plausible that you may be experiencing some sort of mental breakdown or paranoia than that what you are telling to them about your partner or spouse is really happening. But if you think that you are gaslighted, you still can do some things that would provide you with evidence for the future when you need to back up your version of what was happening in your relationship or marriage. You can still maintain at least some control over the situation, and that can benefit you in the future, whatever happens. One of the ways of doing so is journaling. If you suspect gaslighting, keep a journal and record the dates and times of the events that occur. Of course, make sure to write down what happened with all the details as well. And the most important thing, keep your journal safe. Another way to protect yourself and have evidence for the future of what was going on in your relationship is to have voice memos. You can try recording the incidents of gaslighting with your mobile phone or another device, just to keep them for the record. Also, Emails. If you cannot keep a journal because you are afraid that it can be easily intercepted by the abuser, then you could ask a trusted person, like a friend or family member, to keep it safe for you. And I don't mean the actual physical journal, but after each incident of gaslighting, you can send this person an email with the description of the event and then delete it from your own device. So there is no trace and you are safe, but at the same time, your trusted person has all the evidence that you may need in the future. Also photos. By taking photos, you will have a visual proof of what is going on. And taking photos can be quite useful in situations where, for example, you're being told that you remember things wrongly or that you haven't done something that you're sure that you done. So for example, if you left your car keys, for instance, somewhere, and then you can't find them because your abusive partner hides those keys from you, but they tell you that you obviously have forgotten where you put your keys, then by having the picture of where you put your keys, you will be able to know that it's not only happening in your head, and it's not you forgetting things or you getting insane. And that kind of pictures are not that much for the immediate confrontation with the abuser, but they are rather for your own record to assure you that the problem is not with you, but that you are in fact gaslighted. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you want to share your experience of being gaslighted, or how you realized that it was not you going insane but that you had been abused, and or how you managed to move on, you are the most welcome to do so. Let me know how you broke free from being gaslighted. Talk to you soon, and bye for now.